3 gods, powerful and passionate, left Asgard for Midgard. They found Ask and Embla, weak, fateless in that land. That's the end of that verse. Oh, but I'm going to keep going because it makes more sense if we continue on with it. So verse 18. They had no breath, no soul, no hair, no voice. They looked inhuman. Odin gave them breath. Honir gave them souls. Loth gave them hair and human faces.
So this describes the creation of humanity in relation to the gods we've already been talking about. And again, we did get into that what's described prior to this is what humanity would have actually done. That's archaeological, historical, whatever. That's true. But this is still saying that there are these gods that came before humanity as we know it and created them, essentially. And what strikes me here, so in Ask and Embla are variously translated. Ask is almost always translated as ash, the tree ash. Embla can be translated as elm or vine, but I like the translation elm just a bit better, just out of it being kind of 2 trees. And that tree symbolism is actually one of the biggest things. We're going to come to Yggdrasil next, actually, just skipping ahead slightly, but the world tree. But for humanity to have their symbol be trees here, that's something gigantic. Like way back in the beginning of time, we would have lived in trees. And so the world being a tree, that's something. But for humanity to also be a tree, maybe this is referencing where we came from or where we lived for such a long time. But as well, it's just connecting to symbolism that is so long ago, so far removed from these peoples, especially who lived in Northern Europe. They're not in Africa in trees anymore. Very, very, very long removed. So, and then obviously goes into the creation by Odin and his brothers or hypostases of Odin or something like that. Hunir is referenced in one other place, but Loder, I believe, is never. This is the only place Loder is referenced, if
That's right.
I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, he doesn't get referenced again. There's some thought that Loder might actually be Loki, but it's a theory. It's not. There's not a lot of evidence either way with Loder.
For this coming from Odin, though, to me that's the key detail of stanza 18, the second part here. For humanity to, and this is describing the creation of consciousness, essentially, yes. Right? This is like humanity is discovering itself, literally, and that's what consciousness is. And all this other cultural stuff would have happened later, after the descent into consciousness, because you're not going to have chimpanzees building stuff or no. Whatnot or giving. I mean, they haven't told us their names for the moon and the sun or anything like that, but we're just assuming they don't have them
for sure.
Chimpanzees, but because that's what we were, or we shared an ancestor with them. For those of you who are being pedantic about it, but for Odin to be the one to create, and he doesn't create them in a physical sense, although I guess taking from Ymir or whatever, he sort of does. But in this stanza, he's giving breath, spirit, blood, complexion, the things that make humans. Blood and breath, those are huge concepts mythologically. Blood was a symbol of life for an incredibly long time. The earliest religious records we have are, well, some of the earliest are red ochre sprinkled on corpses as a symbol of that they actually have life and might become renewed. And Odin is the god of inspiration and wisdom and giving breath and life. It makes so much sense. We'll cover Odin a
For
lot.
sure. That's why one of Odin's names is Allfather, because he's the father of all, precisely for this reason in the stanza. Something else worth noting, and you touched on it, is that Odin is a god of wisdom and inspiration. And without these things, you need these things for human ingenuity. So the building of tools and the creation of the temples and religion and all that kind of stuff, that would be directly attributed to Odin giving them breath. It's that breath of ingenuity that makes humans and not chimpanzees, that because chimps do use tools, but it's not, I mean, it's quite obviously not the same. And so we have a bit of an explanation for why it's not the same. We have, this divine power infusing that into people.
Well, and just by the fact that they make, there's a distinction between the physical creation of the world and the physical creation of people. These things exist. This ash and elm exist prior to Odin. They find them, actually, is the wording, right?
Yes.
And so they exist. They exist physically, but they don't have breath yet. And so, I mean, that's such a key detail. And to understand that at this level of culture, I mean, there's no science saying that one day we became conscious compared to our other ape ancestors, whatever. There's nothing that they would have known particularly. So, I mean, it's coming down through stories. It's coming down through Odin. It's fantastic. I'll say I'm consistently amazed and impressed by all these details here in this first few stanzas that go into creation and whatnot, because it's just mind-boggling that they would have such understanding of the world without going through it scientifically.
For sure, it's sophisticated when it certainly doesn't have to be, and no one would expect it to be at that level of, I don't know, what do you call it, human development, but it is. There's a real understanding here, and they're explaining it in the way that they're able to explain it. And they're not dumb. They just don't live in the, post-enlightenment scientific world that we live in, but they understood what was going on. Something that I find interesting, so it says that they had no breath, no soul, no hair, no voice. And then later on, Loth gave them hair and human faces. And it makes me really think of that becoming self-conscious, or conscious of yourself, that you know what you look like now and you know what you are. And you have your own things to say, because no voice, but now they have voice. It really shows that they know who they are now. That there's that understanding of them and their place in the world around them.
Yeah, I mean, haven't we done? There's been studies done that try and see, is the dog who sees himself in the mirror actually recognizing it as himself or whatnot? And gorillas and chimpanzees have shown a little bit of knowing that, a little bit, but just an inkling, like a tiny bit. Yeah, I really like you pointing that out. That's a great detail. That self-recognition. That's just as important as consciousness in general, I think. Right?
For sure, I think it, in a lot of ways, it springs from that.
Yeah.